that's what land use might look like. Let me just go focus a bit more now on the dairy industry. Last November in Auckland, New Zealand hosted the 2010 World Dairy Summit, organised by the International Dairy Federation. And it was a wonderful conference. Lots of delegates, about 2,250 from around the world. And I was involved in two ways. I chaired the Leaders Forum one afternoon, but then I chaired for 2 days, co-chaired a 2-day session within the week of the conference on sustainable dairy farming. This was a program launched 2.5 years ago by David Homer, a British dairy farmer who's on the board of the International Dairy Federation. And the first conference was in Edinburgh 2.5 years before Auckland. And we had in our farming stream about 250 farmers and scientists from around the world. About 40% of them were New Zealanders. And we had a wonderfully interactive day of conference and then a day of field trips with them. And in the day of conference, they all had handheld devices, so we could ask questions, they could vote, they could text us answers, all kinds of stuff. So here are some of the answers. We asked them, is human activity contributing to global climate change? These are dairy farmers and agricultural scientists, and 95% yes, said yes. Hardly anybody said no. That was almost a complete reversal of Edinburgh 2.5 years before, where it was very strongly no. Is dairy farming contributing to global climate change? 75% yes, 17% said no. Again, a reversal from Edinburgh. From what you've heard today, is dairy farming part of the climate change solution? 85% said yes. This is a great question. Those farmers, those scientists are also consumers, so we asked them, would you pay more for something that was deemed to be farmed sustainably? And most said no or very little. I think that's dead right. We would be doing this because we're trying to improve farming systems and profitability, not because we would hope to get some pat on the back, some bit of a premium out of this. There may be a premium there, but we should be wanting to do this for really good basic, good economics, good business, good farming, and get the reward that way than simply just a premium. We asked this question at the beginning of the day, at the end, and the end. How do you rate sustainability as a driver in your farming business? The answers at the beginning of the day are the green, so strong support for that, but stronger by the end of the day, which was the red. And then we asked, will you lead, follow, or resist? And needless to say, they were self-selecting audience, and that they were already onto these issues. But very interestingly, the co-convener of the program for the sessions was Willie Lefranc, who is an Ashburton dairy farmer, who a couple of weeks ago, Rotorua, got elected as the chairman of the dairy farmers section within Federated Farms. So this is the sort of things that's driving it. In response to these issues, we have been working almost 10 years now on the science of agricultural greenhouse gases, starting with that first in the Greenhouse Gas Research Consortium. But then it's this new agricultural greenhouse gas research centre formed in Palmerston North on the Ag Research campus there, post-Copenhagen with some good bit of funding, which is where a lot of the focus is now. And these are the people most directly plugged into that global program. So 4 main areas of work. How do we reduce that methane? How do we reduce nitrous oxide? How do we make sure the soil stores more of that carbon, which will improve the fertility of the soil and improve its ability to retain moisture, for example, during drought periods? And how do we deliver all of this in ways that farmers can use very straightforwardly, reliably, and profitably too? So that's the main bit of work that's up. And our opportunity, lots of ways to express it, but here's one way. When Fonterra carbon footprinted dairying now 2 years ago, they worked out that up to the farm gate, that process was generating about a kilogram of milk, greenhouse gases for every litre of milk. So that's an awful lot of milk. It's about 15 million tonnes of greenhouse gases. That's sort of saying that's 15 million tonnes of nutrients which are leaking out of the farming system. So how do we help cows to sheep to digest their feed better? How do we run our farms differently so that those animals, those farming systems can turn more of those nutrients into milk, meat, or other products, and therefore and do so in a way that improves the environmental opportunity. So this is quite simply where one of the areas that agricultural science is taking us, and it's a brilliant business opportunity for healthier cows and soil, and more food, better environment, and more sustainable profitability for farmers. So I'll stop at that point and look forward to some few questions now, and then Jim and I will do some more together. So, thanks very much indeed.
Right, now there's a lady over here who's keen to ask a question.
It's not the same question, but it's for Rod and Scientist Jim. Thank you very much for that. That was really interesting. Actually addressing the impact that the carbon emissions will have on agriculture and vice versa. Another sort of a question which I thought might be addressed today was actually how will climate change actually impact on agriculture and horticulture in New Zealand? Will there be changes in regard to what's being produced and how it's being produced?
Yeah, I'll let Jim talk to that as the agricultural meteorologist between the two of us.
And then when Jim's done this, we'll do 3 from Rod, and then we'll just come back to whatever.
Okay, well, how will agriculture change? Obviously, if we just, Rod talked about land use changes, and there's external things other than climate, but if we just took it based on climate only, as it gets warmer, obviously pests and diseases increase, or for example insect pests, life cycles increase, so there's more opportunity for them in that sense. But if we look at horticulture, arable and cropping, what happens is you get activities that were further north, move south or move up in terms of elevation. The classic one is obviously wine grapes, and New Zealand, and particularly this area in Marlborough, is into white wine grapes, but as you warm the climate up, you can have your red wine styles. Kiwi fruit is a classic. When I first looked at climate and kiwi fruit about 20 years ago, we actually surveyed kiwi fruit in research orchards from Kerikeri right through to Rangiora. Well, the Rangiora ones actually weren't economic at all. So it means that areas such as around Christchurch become viable, whereas Kerikeri, it's too warm, you don't get fertilisation. So cropping moves south and up in elevation. In terms of pastoral farming, it's really which areas get wetter and which areas get drier in terms of rain-fed agriculture. So I'm not talking about irrigated agriculture. So that's important. Traditionally, areas we have dairying in the North Island, you're not irrigating. Obviously, in eastern areas that get drier, it does limit irrigation. So those are the sorts of impacts on agriculture. If you just took climate into account only, but obviously
knowing the sheep and beef farmers well up in Hawke's Bay, they're already very focused on the repeated droughts they've had, and already quite significantly modifying their farming systems so they can keep farming sheep and beef. Similarly down in Canterbury, it makes sense to do a lot, so as long as this is right for the water to store water rather than irrigate through aquifers. So we can see some shifts like that. And the best single story on change in agriculture that we've come across so far in our travels is in Hamilton. We ran across a very enthusiastic member of the audience who's actually a coffee bean grower in Waikato. And he's making it work.
A couple of questions for Rod. Gentlemen, just can't see you. Right. Just here? No, they're just down here. Yep.
Yeah, I've got a question. Where does the housing come from the airline for animal emissions?
In the animals themselves, the main greenhouse gas emission is methane, which is the chemical combination of methane is carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen and oxygen, CH, I think it's right?
CH4.
CH4.
Carbon and nitrogen.
Yeah, so there's a lot of carbon in the methane. Secondly, the energy used in farming, if you're using fossil fuels, you are generating carbon that way too. Or indeed in the downstream processing. You could use entirely renewable energy, either liquid fuels or electricity, to deal with the energy component of that. But it's really tackling methane is a big issue. And as I stressed, this is not just globally, this is not just an issue with ruminant animals. It's also an issue with the likes of rice farming as well.
Yeah, well, I always thought that it came from grasslands, so the grasslands act as carbon sink.
The grasslands, or indeed any vegetative matter, does store carbon. That's absolutely true. And when we get a lot better at being able to measure the carbon flux, the carbon flow between air and land, and the plants and the atmosphere, and where animals play a role in that, I'd like to think it would be possible that farmers could, or indeed kiwi fruit orchardists, could be credited with the carbon stored in that way. But that's immensely complicated with having, we've got big challenges just being able to measure emissions of ruminant animals, so that's a lot further down the road. But you're right in that carbon plays is the critical building block all the way through that complete ecosystem, and therefore understanding that ecosystem as best we possibly can, and therefore being able to manage those systems the best we possibly can is the long-term goal here.
Ed, you've got your
Thank you. Yeah, comment on the question. I work in the health sector, and I agree with the Director General of WHO when she said climate change is the biggest public health issue of this century. And there's overlap with agriculture, obviously, with disease vector risk, with new insects coming out short. But my question is about cross-sector stuff. Do you think, given that cutting coal production and use is one of the quickest way of decreasing emissions, there's a risk if we develop a green agriculture sector, if we go ahead and develop our coal industry alongside that, we're not being consistent in this sense?
Correct. We are being wildly inconsistent, and people will probably notice. If Solid Energy was to develop the lignite fields in Southland, as it wants to do to turn it into a solid fuel and into liquid fuel, into fertiliser, it's going to generate vast quantities of carbon in that process. It says that it hopes to do carbon capture and storage. Well, that's still blue sky technology that nobody's figured out. And it's going to do lots of forest offsets and the rest. But that's pretty crazy. The biggest issue for the world overall is actually coal. We can probably get to liquid fuels for vehicles, non or electric vehicles, but trying to get to wean the world from coal is by far the biggest issue, absolutely. And it's pretty crazy for us to jump into that game when we have plenty of opportunities elsewhere.
Now, did we have a question from Rod? David?